Hi, I'm Leyla. We're going to talk today about the wonderful, scandalous history of the First Ward Ball. Before we get into that, I have another random fun story that I want to share with all of you. And this is kind of an impromptu story, but I want to share it because of the location that we're in. We're in the Bad Apple, and this used to be John Barleycorn. You guys remember when it was John Barleycorn? Woo! So I don't think I ever actually made it to John Barleycorn. But my parents did, and my dad went here a lot in the 70s, and we have an infamous family story where my dad was like in the main dining room with a friend. He had gotten a burger, they were eating it, he was in the middle of some heated argument over something or something, I don't know what, but with your burger comes a pickle, right? So he was holding the pickle, and as he was gesturing frantically, he managed to toss the pickle out of his hand. They turned and they watched as it went end over end and landed in some random woman's open purse that was sitting on the floor. So they thought about it, decided to do nothing about it because he realized he couldn't in good conscience walk up to a stranger and go, "Excuse me, I'm so sorry, I've just tossed my pickle in your purse, can I retrieve it?" He's gonna get slapped. So there's a random fun family story for you, for John Barleycorn and the Bad Apple. Told with his permission, of course. So, the infamous First Ward Ball. What is the First Ward Ball? Short summary of it. What it supposedly was a political fundraiser that ran in the First Ward from about 1897 to 1909. And this fundraiser was in place so that the two aldermen of the ward could raise money to support their campaigns for re-election, and also so that they could use some of the money towards charity events of some sort in the First Ward. This is not really true. What the First Ward Ball actually was a night of drunken debauchery, the likes of which I don't think Chicago has ever seen before, or seen since, and I don't think we'll ever see again. The parties lasted all night long until dawn, and it was 20, 30,000 people shoved into one room, people getting so drunk that they would pass out but not fall over because the crowds would hold them up. And it was everybody in the underworld coming together to rub elbows with each other, with local politicians, with local businessmen. It was a lot of chaos. So, how did this come to be? First of all, the First Ward. This photo up on the screen is what the First Ward looked like in the mid-1890s or so. And at that time, they called it the wealthiest ward in the world because it contains two very prominent districts in the city of Chicago, places where you could find a lot of money. So first of all, it contains downtown. Lots of money and businesses downtown. Second of all, maybe more importantly here, it also contains part of the red light district. This is where you're going to find some of the levee district. So this is where you're going to go if you want to go gambling, find a saloon, find drink, find drugs, find women of the night. You're going to the levee. Lots of money in both of these areas. At this point in time, until 1923, each ward in the city was run by two aldermen, and the two aldermen who are the main characters for the story tonight are, of course, Michael Kenna and John Coughlin. They took advantage of the business district, and they definitely took advantage of the red light district there. This is a map of part of downtown. This is like the South Loop area from the mid-1890s that's just detailing all of the so-called bad businesses that are here. All of the red that you see, those are all brothels. Lots going on. This is that middle street. Let's see if I can point. Yes, this middle street here, that's Custom House Place, so that's Federal Place. Harrison is on the south end here. Where I stayed in the dorms at Columbia is like another block or two that way, to give you an idea of where this area is. So there was a lot going on. This is Michael Kenna. This was one of the two aldermen of the district. He was born in 1857. By the time he was 12 years old, he was an orphan. He was working as a newsboy on the streets. It was at this age that he actually borrowed $50 from a bartender to buy a newsstand, and he ran it so successfully that within a month he was able to pay that bartender back. It was also while he was working as a newsboy that he got the nickname Hinky Dink. And he got the nickname Hinky Dink because he was very small. He was about 5'4", so for reference, maybe about this tall or so. He was very good at organizing people. He was kind of the opposite of John Coughlin in a lot of ways. He was small, he wasn't too fashionably dressed, he was more quiet, he was more behind the scenes of things. He owned a saloon called the Working Men's Exchange, which you can see here, with a lot of barrels of beer in front of it. This saloon was a place where people who were maybe down and out could go and they could get some free lunch, some free soup, maybe a free drink or two before they started to have to pay for it. And of course, in return, you were expected to vote the way that Hinky Dink wanted you to vote. Very good at organizing people. Even before he had official political power, he wasn't elected as an alderman until 1897. He was known for getting people to vote the way he wanted to keep people in or out of office, depending on what was going to benefit him the best. So this is the Working Man's Exchange. You can also see, it's a little small, but the sign up there that says rooms, those are rooms for the Alaska Hotel, which was a hotel that was located above the Working Man's Exchange. So if you needed a place to crash for the night, you could go up there. Interestingly enough, the building that housed the Working Men's Exchange still exists. I think that's a rarity. A lot of the buildings that were around in the Levine and the Red Light District, 130 years ago, they've all been totally wiped out. But this one's still here. It's on that weird block of Clark Street that's kind of in the South Loop. That's kind of not super great. You guys know that block of Clark Street I'm talking about? Yeah. This building. We all know this one, right? Yeah. Side note, this seat and velvet is a terrible idea. I am sliding off this thing, so I'm going to take this off. All right, maybe that's a little better. So this is the building where the Working Men's Exchange used to be. It's now a pawn shop, but you can see there's still a sign for an SRO that's above there, so you can still go sleep in the same place where they had the Alaska Hotel. It's just kind of interesting. This is John Coughlin. This photo is taken about 1890 in Kansas City. Now, John Coughlin was born in 1860 in Chicago, and he was very flamboyant in his outfits. He was very loud. He liked press. He liked writing weird, bad poetry and music and putting it on display for everyone. He liked horse racing. Again, kind of the opposite of Michael Kenna in that he's quiet and in the background, and this guy wanted to be large in front at all points in time. Both of these men were seriously corrupt. He especially was. He didn't really care too much about denying the fact that he took bribes and fleeced people for money in the newspapers. They would accuse him of it all the time. He just kind of didn't address it. The only time he asked the newspaper to rescind a comment about him was when they printed that he was born in Waukegan. He said, "How dare you? I was born in Chicago. Take that back." Pretty good. There is John a little bit towards the end of his life. This is taken in the late 1920s or so. Now, his well-known nickname is, of course, Bathhouse John. Called Bathhouse John, Bathhouse, or simply The Bath, which is probably my favorite of his nicknames. And he got this job because before he started in politics, he worked in a bathhouse as a rubber. As a rubber. You all know what a rubber is, right? Exactly, thank you. Rubbing. He was a masseuse. It's like an 1890s term for masseuse, which is just kind of funny. He was a rubber. Ended up owning a couple bathhouses, so that's where he got the name Bathhouse John. So here you have your two main characters, Bathhouse John and Hinky Dink, or H Dink, as occasionally the papers would call him, which is, again, a fantastic nickname, H Dink. Here are the two men together. How they made their money? Well, they were in politics. John got elected in 1892 to be alderman of the First Ward. He held that position, by the way, until his death in 1938. Very long time. Kenna was elected in 1897. He held that position until 1923, at which point they switched to only have one alderman per ward. And when Bathhouse John died in 1938 is when Kenna took over again until his death in 1946. So they were in charge for 50 plus years of this part of the city of Chicago. They have the levee district. They decided to milk that for all it was worth. Both of these guys were involved in bootling. So basically you're just taking bribe and kickbacks in order to award contracts to different companies. Pretty open about this. They also would make sure that nothing happened to different business owners in their district who might be operating businesses that aren't necessarily legal at the time. Gambling houses are not legal in the 1900s, neither are brothels, but these two are in charge and they can tell police to raid people or not to raid people. So if you want to curry their favor, give them some money, they're going to look the other way. They're going to make sure that nothing happens to you. And if you decide that you don't want to give them a bribe, well, you might be shut down the next day. Who knows how that works. So this is how they made all of their money. Now, the first ward ball was really kind of like the height of taking from their constituents. It started originally not as the first ward ball, and it was actually a party that happened at Freeburg's Dance Hall, started in the late 1880s, and it was a party that was put on by Madam Carrie Watson to support one of her employees who went by the name of Lame Jimmy. It was the party for Lame Jimmy. Going by 1880s terminology here. And he was hired to play the violin and play piano in Carrie Watson's brothel. And they would have an annual party for him where they would fundraise, give him the proceeds, and everyone would just get absolutely wasted all night long. This party happened until 1896 when there was an issue that happened at about dawn, and there were two cops who were involved in the party. They were very drunk. They started talking about guns. They started trying to shoot things, getting into an argument, bled out onto the streets. Other cops saw them. Someone was shot and killed, and that basically ended this party for Lame Jimmy. Now, they said, well, this is kind of sad. You know, the aldermen enjoyed this. It was a nice fundraiser. It was an excuse to go out, party, have a good time. And they decided to run with this idea. And they said, well, hey, why don't we do our own version of this? We'll do it bigger. We'll do it better. And we'll take that money and we'll use it to fundraise for campaigns / line our own pockets. So 1897 is when you had the first ward ball. And that actually took place in the 1st Regimental Armory, which looked like this. Just ignore the cars. This photo is from the 1960s or so, just before it was torn down. So first few years it happened here. It was very successful. That first year, 1897, they raised about $25,000 for themselves. It's a lot of money. Took a couple years until newspapers, other places started to get wind of what was going on here and what kind of debauchery you would find at the first ward ball. So here's a headline from 1899 from the Inner Ocean. The Inner Ocean really did not like these guys, really did not like the first ward ball. So you have the hinky-dink dance. Grand ball of panel house democracy at 1st Regiment Armory is a nasty affair. Scum of First Ward Society and Harrison healers compose the swell set, tickets forced on gamblers, receipts of the box office to be expended in the colonization of illegal voters. So on exactly how this worked, basically, if you set up a business and you were in the first ward, you would eventually get a card that said, hey, you know, we're part of like the First Ward Democratic Club. We heard you moved in, you started a business. Someone mentioned you for membership. We all unanimously approved you. Here's your membership card. This is when we have meetings. You don't have to pay dues, but you should come to the meetings and we're going to tell you what to do from there. So, before the ball, what would happen is they would send people to basically all of the saloons, brothels, gambling houses, et cetera, in the levee, and they would have books of tickets. And they would say, hey, we have a first ward ball coming up. You need to buy tickets to come. It's $1 a ticket. How many would you want? And the owners of the business would say, I don't know if I want any. I don't know if I want to go. we'll pass on it. And they'd be like, okay, yeah, you don't have to buy any, but I heard there might be a raid next week. It'd be really sad if you got shut down. I don't think that'll happen. They're like, okay, I guess I could buy some. How many? And they're like, well, 50 would be good. They're like, we don't have 50 employees. And it's like, well, that's fine. You can give them away to people, right? 50 is a good number. We'll take $50. Thanks. And that's how they sold all of their tickets. So a lot of free tickets would go out to just random people because these businesses were kind of forced to buy however much they were told to buy. In years as the ball progressed, maybe one year it was $50. The next year someone's going to come and they say, hey, we only want you to buy 75 tickets this year. And they're like, well, last year it was 50. And they're like, well, yeah, but last year your brothel only had 10 girls working there. Now you have 12 girls working there. So we think you should buy 75 tickets. And that's how this worked. To advertise this ball in 1899, there were, quote, lithographs portraying a girl in one diaphanous garment that were left in each resort in order to advertise the grand ball. So scandalous postcards. Come to the ball. See almost naked ladies. As to who would be told to buy tickets, Inner Ocean said that membership for the club buying tickets would be sent to, quote, all-night saloon keepers, policy shop owners, disorderly house hangers-on, tramps, confidence men, panel house creepers, the criminal, and the vicious. So, sounds like a fun party, right? After this year or two in 1899, there was apparently some complaints from some of the attendees because they said if they left any of their furs or jewels alone, they were all getting stolen. I mean, you're inviting all of the thieves and pickpockets from here, so yeah, it's kind of what happens. The 1900 ball. Here's Bathhouse John, of course. The theme of a lot of these balls was masquerade, so it was required that you have some sort of a mask if you want to be on the dance floor, some sort of a fun outfit that you would wear. Bathhouse, especially in these early years, would stand at the front entrance to greet everyone. Quote, he stood near the door and shook hands with those who entered. In addition to his green swallowtail coat and lavender trousers, he wore a white silk waistcoat brocaded with heliotrope rosebuds and saffron carnations. His gloves were pink. He said that the ball was a brilliant democratic event. He was the only one present to take chances wearing a silk hat. Okay, so this man is greeting you at the ball in a green coat, lavender trousers, pink gloves, a silk top hat, and a white shirt with roses on it. This is an extravagant outfit. 1900 was also the year that the Bath wrote this wonderful song and poem called Dear Midnight of Love. They performed it at the ball in 1900. I don't have all the lyrics for you, but I will read you the chorus of this song so you can get a flavor for some of his wonderful poetry. Dear midnight of love, why did we meet? Dear midnight of love, your face is so sweet. Pure as the angels above, surely again we shall speak. Loving only as doves, dear midnight of love. Yeah. He was kind of made fun of for this a little bit. But yeah, here's his face on the sheet music for it. 1902. Can I make this bigger? Ooh, there we go. So 1902 is when they realized that the 1st Regiment Armory was too small for the ball and they had to move it elsewhere. So they decided to move it to the Chicago Coliseum. And you can see what it looks like here. The ball took place in March of this year. So here's the front. Oh, how do I get out? There we go. Definitely looks like a castle. I like this kind of postcard version of it where they have nothing else around it and they have these giant American flags. You can see a little bit of that main entrance with a really cool sign that says Coliseum underneath the arch there, and everyone just kind of lining the streets for whatever event this is. I forget exactly what event. Here's the inside of the Colosseum. This photo is from 1908. This is from the 1908 Republican Convention. I feel a little sacrilegious showing a photo of the crowded Colosseum from a Republican convention, and this was for the Democrats, but these are the photos I could find. So this is the inside. So imagine for the ball, it was this many people and more, all packed in here all night long, going crazy. So, 1902, some of the fun festivities they had there. They had, of course, musical performances, more performances of Dear Midnight of Love. Earlier that year, Prince Henry of Prussia had been in town, and he had done some function at the Auditorium Theater, and they had like a specially decorated box for him with his royal monogram on it and all these specially made decorations. They stole all these decorations. I don't know if they stole or took them, but whatever happens, they got all these decorations and they used it to decorate the Colosseum here. So I can just imagine Hinky Bathhouse sitting in this giant royal box that was constructed for actual royalty, lording over everything, looking down at all of their constituents who were giving them a lot of money. 1902 was also the year that they decided for the Grand March they were going to do something a little bit special, and they got 2 elephants from Baraboo, Wisconsin, where Ringling Brothers is held, to come down here and lead the Grand March. Front of the Colosseum, ooh, with the cool sign. This is from the 20s, obviously, with the cars. And this is not from the First Ward Ball, but this is the Colosseum with an elephant and 2 people on it, so it gives you an idea of what happened. So the Grand March, this was something that Coughlin led, and it happened at midnight every ball. What happens was he would basically lead everyone in a giant conga line of like 2,000-3,000 people throughout the main floor of the Colosseum, and they would be singing, "Hail, hail, the gang's all here, what the hell do we care, what the hell do we care?" And it was just kind of this giant drunken march. So they had elephants for this march. Apparently, Coughlin had second thoughts about actually riding the elephant, so he wasn't on top of it to lead the march this year, and they had someone else who was dressed up in his clothes up there, so everyone could show tribute to the fake king that was on top of the elephants running around. This was also the year when some of the entertainment beyond the Grand March and the elephants here were a hoochie coochie dancer. And now, oh no, there we go. I gotta pull up a video. I actually got a video of this. Come on. Oh no. Exit. Ooh, there we go. Okay. So they had one of the dancers who had been performing at the World's Fair in 1893 on the Midway. They had belly dancers who went by the name of Little Egypt performing. So they had one of those doing a belly dance as part of the entertainment for the First Ward Ball. Not sure if this is the same woman or not, but this would have been about the same dance. This was recorded in 1896. So everyone behold how scandalous this is. She's doing this. She's twirling the hips. Yep, scandalous. Imagine this with the elephants, and you're very drunk. It's a good time. Hail, hail, the gang's all here. And probably the best part about this video, so this is an Edison video, and it's also apparently one of the earliest examples of film censorship. So this is the exact same clip we saw, but when it was censored by Edison. So don't worry, you can't really see any of these gyrations that are going on. You saw an ankle, oh no. So, quick description for you of the Grand March from 1903. For that ball, that year anyway, they said they had about 15,000 people in attendance. So that is how many people you could fit at the Coliseum at that time, 15,000 people. And there's Fatima. Okay. Describing the Grand March says, quote, Grand March was started shortly after midnight, and marvelous revolutions were exhibited by Alderman Coughlin, who traversed the floor, walking backwards about 30 times. With uplifted hands, he directed the movements of the 2,000 marchers, who were led in diversions by First Search McNally and Leon Will. So this is the cartoon drawing of the 1903 ball. You can see that Coughlin is definitely the king here, bowing up on the left-hand side. You've got Hinky Dink right next to him. You've got First Search McNally, who has fallen on the floor there because the floor was slippery. He apparently was called First Search McNally, who was a police officer, but he got that name because when bodies were being brought to the morgue, he was the first to search them and take whatever valuables they had. These are the kind of people who are at the First Ward Ball. This is for the 1904 ball. First Ward Ball held with the usual trimmings. Guests consumed 16,000 quarts of beer and 14,000 quarts of champagne, according to Hinky Dink. So he might be exaggerating a little bit here. "'Twas a grand and glorious gathering of the common people," said Hinky Dink, and he based his statement on the following. Number invited, $1 per invite, 20,000. No, sorry, 30,000. So they're making $30,000 just on selling these tickets here. Attendance, conservative, 15,000. Attendance, according to Bathhouse, 27,000 people. Waiters, 250 on hand. Champagne consumed, 14,000 quarts. Beer, 16,000 quarts. Soft drinks, 45. I feel like I'm one of the 45 with my Diet Coke here. 17,000 cigars, $64,100 spent on refreshments, and $105,000 for money spent on clothes and fixings by the women. Fixings, yes, all of the jewels. And then I love the last sentence here. Many of the worn-out waiters slept on the scene of the battle. They were serving all night long. Now, this is a good point to mention here that if you wanted to be a waiter at the First Ward Ball, there's a good chance that you're going to be making a lot of money. You're working all night long. It's going to be real hard, but you're going to make money. And the aldermen knew this, so if you wanted to be a waiter there, you had to pay them $5 for the privilege of doing that. They're making more money. Also, a lot of the alcohol that they would sell for these events would be donated by wine salesmen who wanted to curry favor with the different saloons who would be there and with the aldermen themselves. So they're making money on tickets. They're making money on the waiters who pay them to work. They're making money on free booze by charging full price for it. A hell of a lot of money. I also just love that the papers called it an orgy all the time. It means something a little different today. 1906, things are starting to take a little bit of a turn, and this is where you have newspapers starting to notice hey, there's a lot going on here. Maybe this isn't so good for the city and its public image. What are you actually doing with all of the money here? So they're starting to try and get ahead of it a little bit. Here, calls war to orgy, boon to charity. Hinky Dink says profits are used to lead ignorant to democracy. So for the 1906 ball, Hinky Dink said that they had 25 to 30,000 people in attendance. Again, the Coliseum can hold 15,000, twice as many people as should be in there. And they said after expenses, they were really only making $8,000. It wasn't a lot of money. They said that the money that they did make would be used for, quote, charity, education, burying the dead, and general ward benefits for the people. 1 or 2 consumptives will be sent down to Phoenix, Arizona. There is plenty of use for it. When anybody connected with the First Ward Democratic Club needs help, he applies to Alderman Coughlin or to me, and the money finally comes out of the funds by action of the executive committee of the club. John C. Schubert is the treasurer of the club. The money will be held either by him or Alderman Coughlin, I guess. Like, I didn't even know. Just throwing in an I guess there. So again, we are saying that they're raising all this money and it's enough to send 1, maybe 2 people to Arizona. And that's it. There was a lot of champagne that went through, and I want to thank Olivia for champagne. Cheers. So beyond sending a couple people tuberculosis down to the desert, when Hinky Dink was asked by the papers how all this money is going to help educate folks on politics, he says, well, there isn't much of that. It consists of hiring good halls and good speakers to teach the people of the First Ward to vote the straight Democratic ticket. So this is how they described the 1907 First Ward Ball. First Ward, an annual orgy. Political ball beats anything Alderman Kenna saw in Paris. 20,000 there, only 5 bars. 250 waiters, though, but 5 bars. Crowded promenade like football scrimmage, long gowns tabooed. So, before the ball started, some people were starting to get a little bit wise to the aldermen here and how to control them. They, of course, didn't handle every aspect of setting the balls up. They assigned different tasks to different people that they trusted. So one man who was assigned to hire the waiters, it got out that he wasn't actually planning on hiring union waiters, and he was only going to hire non-union waiters. Yes, gasp. This is a big issue. So R.H. Mackenzie, who is the head of the waiters union, found out about this, went to the papers, basically said, how dare you? We will remember this next election season. And of course, the Bath had to do something about this. He couldn't risk losing any of these votes. So when he heard about it, he, quote, with a frown on his face, the First Ward czar arose, donned his varicolored raiment, and hurried forth. The First Ward Democratic Club abhorred the suggestion of graft and advised him to see Mackenzie and adjust the difficulty. They're not corrupt at all. How dare you say that? So basically, he sent someone to talk to the head of the waiters union to reassure them, like, oh no, this is an error on our end. We didn't actually mean that. We're definitely going to hire the union and only union waiters. And then when the head of the union agreed to that, he brought him down to the newspapers so the head of the union could tell the papers, yes, we are in agreement. The First Ward aldermen are good. We will work their event. So trying to get ahead of bad publicity. Apparently this year they were also trying to do the exact same thing with the musicians. They were only going to hire non-union musicians, but then the Chicago Federation of Musicians heard about it, threatened the same action, and they said, okay, you know what? Union musicians this year too. Great. We'll do that. For the ball here. The Trib said, all previous orgies were eclipsed by the annual First Ward Democratic Ball last night, the one that provides Alderman John Coughlin the money to pay his campaign expenses next spring. Coughlin, about the ball, said, this is the greatest ever. I am delighted with the social success achieved by the First Ward Democratic Club this evening. The hall seats 14,000, and you can see that they are standing up in rows in the back of the seats in the gallery. Kenna said, it's far ahead of anything I saw in Paris during my recent European tour. There is nothing like it in the world. Could any other social function in Chicago attract a crowd like this? Not on your life. What are you having? So for this one, they had 2 bands, 200 waiters, 35,000 quarts of beer, 10,000 quarts of champagne, and then once they went through that, they had to call for reinforcements in the middle of the night. 75 kegs of beer. They had 3 bars on the main floor, 1 in the basement, 1 in the northeast corner. All the aldermen were there except for a couple who were sick. They had congressmen, they had mayors, lots of people. And no long gowns. Long gowns tabooed. Long gowns were tabooed at the first ward ball, not necessarily because they want you to come dressed scantily with your knees or ankles showing, but because the crowd of people there was so tight, it would be hard to move if you had a long gown, and the floor was actually was absolutely filthy. Imagine a bunch of drunk people. They're going to be dropping crap everywhere, lots of beer, really sticky, so you don't want the bottom of your dresses to get dirty, so no long gowns. To throw everyone off this year, 1907, Bathhouse also decided to wear black with a lavender cravat, and he had his red sash on that he always wore that said Grand Marshal. So quite a change from the lavender trousers and green coat. Gonna knock that off. This is one of the few photos I've seen of people from the era where they're not just very straight face. He actually has a little bit of a smile to him and a little bit of a glint in his eye. Now this is Arthur Burgess Farwell. The 1908 ball happened, but there was a lot of pushback from people in the city of Chicago against the ball. It basically had grown too large for itself at this point. It was very well known what happened there, what went on, and reformers were starting to work together, starting to gather power to try to put an end to the first ward ball. And Arthur Farwell here led the charge against that. He was the president of the Chicago Law and Order League. Apparently, Hinky Dink and Bathhouse called him Arthur Garbage Farwell. They did not agree with him. One of the other leaders of the reform movements, there were a lot. It was basically a lot of different groups like Chicago Law and Order League, Chicago Anti-Cigarette League. You had different women's clubs coming together, different preachers, different pastors of different churches trying to all band together, all being very vocal, saying you cannot have the first ward ball. It's going to ruin men and women, young girls, young boys. You cannot let this happen. The whole thing has to stop. So Lucy Page Gaston, one of these reformers about the ball, said, quote, "We all know about these orgies and will do all in our power to have the decent element of Chicago put a stop to this form of degeneracy. My information comes firsthand. I got it from the poor creatures of the levee, who advanced it as an argument against my entreaties to lead a better life. From year to year, I have hoped for an uprising of the decent element to prevent the recurrence of such disgraceful orgies, but this is the first time the reform movement has assumed concrete form. It is none too soon, either, for every ball of the past has left its trail of ruined boys and girls and broken homes." I just like that she's like, I talked to those poor, terrible, sad women in the levee, and they refused to talk to me. Arthur Farwell here said, quote, "A real description of the 1907 ball is simply unprintable. You must stop them from putting another on this year. You must stop this disgrace to Chicago. You must stop it in the name of the young men who will be ruined there." So one of the probably most annoying things about Arthur Farwell here is every time he talked to the papers trying to stop the 1908 ball, he just kept talking about how he couldn't talk about what happened at the 1907 ball in the papers. And I'm like, no, what happened? Please tell me. What did you see? How many naked people? I want to know. But no, too scandalous for 1908. Episcopal clergymen of Chicago banding together, adopting a resolution to denounce the ball, said it was, quote, "a disgusting affair, a menace to society, a disgrace to the name of the city, and a serious reflection upon the mayor and the city council and the great party in whose name it's held." So we're using shame here, that the government lets this happen. Now, a date for the ball was announced. It was going to go forth. Reformers were a little bit surprised by this. They thought there was enough outcry from the general public and in the newspapers that they would stop it, but that didn't really happen. They said, quote, "As far as we have learned, there's no legal means of stopping the ball by court procedure. However, there are other strings to our bow, and if the first ward aldermen believe that we are not going to oppose this thing, they will soon learn different." Sounds like a threat. But it's going to happen anyway. So Bathhouse is in pretty good spirits about it. And his response was, "Just tell them that I will fix them up with a good box at the ball and let them see what a good ball really is like. I can't tell what their particular grouch is, but I guess it's simply that they don't know what they're talking about. Let them come around and see a first-class gathering of good fellows." So come see for yourself. This quote is from the Reverend M.P. Boynton, and it's just like very 1900s, and I think kind of funny, so I want to share it. He was obviously against the ball. Here's a reverend. He said, "Chicago can no longer be deceived as to the real object of this so-called ball. It isn't a ball at all. It's a big stick that is used as a reminder of who is the real ruler of the ward. When this big stick swings, for those who make the necessary offerings, it blossoms with the fragrant flowers of protection. But for those who refuse the sacrifice, it becomes a portent of hard times." It's a little much. So the reformers did still try to get it stopped. One of the angles that they had was trying to prevent the chief of police and the mayor from issuing a special permit for the event, because the Coliseum was only allowed to sell liquor until 1 a.m. But this event, they sold liquor till 3 a.m. And of course, in years past, 3 a.m. is when they sold liquor, but in reality, they sold it until daylight and people left. But they're under a little bit more scrutiny here, so they say, okay, permit's going to 3 a.m., that's when we can sell liquor. But Farwell was coming up against this, saying, no, don't issue the permit, and then they can only sell till 1 a.m., and then it's going to cut down on the party. He went to the mayor, he went to the chief of police, and they basically were like, we already issued the permit, it's fine. We don't think anything super bad is going to happen. One of the other tactics that they used to stop the ball was a really last-minute one, and it was a suit that was brought against the owners of the Coliseum that basically said, if you let the ball happen, it's going to be bad for the neighborhood, and it's going to interfere with the church that's next door. Yeah. Not really. The judge eventually dismissed the suit like 2 days before the ball was going to happen, by the way, and said that the church isn't going to be operating when the ball is happening, and he's not there to rule on public morals. He's just there to rule on crimes that happen, and they say that they're going to have a lot of cops there, and it's going to be fine, so there's no crime that's been committed, so no, I'm not shutting down the ball. Now, Bathhouse did make a couple of concessions here. He announced that this year they would not allow any minors to be present at the first ward ball. He said, quote, "Our ball will be perfectly respectable. We won't permit parents to bring their children as formerly. 10 of our own men will be stationed at the doors to keep everybody out resembling a minor, and our men will be assisted by the police." And then he just threw in at the end, "I don't know anything about tickets being distributed by dissolute women." Yeah. So this guy was happy at that. He was like, okay, for humanity's sake, I'm glad the children will be kept out. It proves that the children were previously admitted just to give the orgy a touch of respectability. Which is probably true. The Trib decided to come out in full force against this too. This is a scandalous party. You maybe don't want your neighbors to know that you were out all night at the first ward ball. But they basically took the angle saying that, well, the aldermen keep saying it's a very respectable social event, and we always print the names of who attends social events. So if you're there, we're going to identify you, and we're going to put in the papers that you were there. Bathhouse came out and said, okay, fine, but you can't have any cameras. No cameras allowed at the first ward ball at all. I mean, probably good at the time, but I want pictures of the first ward ball on the inside. Anyway. So, night before the ball. Ball this year was being held on a Monday evening. Partying all night on a Monday. So Sunday night, they had been cleaning up the Coliseum because, I forgot about this. Well, now we have to talk about this scandal. So when the ball was actually going to go forth, Bathhouse made a joke saying that he had heard rumors that the modern dancer Isadora Duncan, pictured here, might attend the ball, but he said it was a respectable event, so if she was going to come, she would not be allowed to wear outfits like this that she performed in because she was too scantily dressed. Nice little quip. No idea if she actually came or not. Probably not. Anyway, Sunday before the ball, there was a dairy show that had been happening in the Coliseum. You're going to be so drunk, you're not going to know what you're stepping in anyway. It's fine. Maybe it'll help keep you upright on the floor. I don't know. Yeah, Guernsey cows. Kettle show had been in. They were cleaning up the Coliseum when about 8 p.m. that Sunday night, there was a bomb that went off. Really didn't want the ball to go on. Oh shit, indeed, yeah. So this is some of the damage that was caused by it. You can see the person here for scale. That guy. So it's a couple stories. Basically what happened is witnesses saw two men running away just before the explosion happened. Oh well. And it looks like they had like dug a hole previously under the foundation of part of the Coliseum that was like next to the annex of the Coliseum. So not the building itself, but like right next to it. The explosion went off and, quote, it lifted the side and roof of the storehouse that was next to the annex and set entire sheets of roofing steel 14 feet long by 3 feet wide and large timbers sailing through the air for a distance of 50 feet. So it ruined a junk shop that was next to the Coliseum annex. It destroyed a boarding house that was there. You can see this damage. There's more photos. So you can see from the top, and then, like, that's the Coliseum right there. So it's like part of the building, kind of, but next to it. And it's not actually enough damage to stop the ball from happening. Another look at some of that damage. So, of course, as soon as this happened, the aldermen were called. They rushed over from where they had been at a theater show, saw it, and then basically said, well, we're going on with the ball, regardless of what they might do to us or the building. They have done everything in their power to stop us. Of course, some may say it's the work of a practical joker, but I must say it's a serious joke. So someone threw a bomb at the Coliseum. Still not quite sure who. They, of course, blame the reformers. Arthur Burge Farwell was like, how dare you say that we did that? We wouldn't do anything like this. There had been other bombings relating to gambling at the time period, too, so cops thought it could be due to that, but they never really figured it out. But it didn't stop the ball. This is the annex, by the way. So this is like right next to where they were trying to blow up the auditorium or the Coliseum. So this is kind of a zoomed in photo of it. This is again from that 1908 Republican convention. So it probably looked very similar to this for the First World Ball a few months later, and then kind of a zoomed out photo of it. So this area served as a bar. The 1908 ball. About it the next day. Actually, just to preface this part of the talk, I have a lot of quotes that I'm going to read to you that are all describing what happened at this ball, and I think it's just the best way to kind of give a picture of what you would expect if you were at, especially this final ball. Tribb said, the Honorable Bathhouse Coughlin and the Honorable Hinky Dink Kenna gave the social event of their lives last night, and the event was the crowning disgrace of Chicago. They packed the Coliseum so full of gentlewomen of no virtue and gentlemen attached to the aforesaid gentlewomen that if a great disaster, thorough in its work, had befallen the festive gathering, there would not have been a second-story work, a dip, a thug, plug ugly, porch climber, dope fiend, or scarlet woman remaining in Chicago. Everyone from the levee was there. People started showing up right when the event opened at 8. By 10 p.m., it was absolutely full, and there were still thousands of people outside with paid-for tickets trying to get in. Describing what the scene was like in front of the Coliseum when they couldn't get in, said, quote, women were fainting, men were slugging each other, hats, bracelets, scarf pins, and furs were being scattered over the sidewalks, streetcars were inextricably mixed up with taximeters and cabs, 2 bands were tooting their lungs out inside, and several thousand latecomers were having their insides squeezed out outside. There were so many people inside that they did the thing you shouldn't do where they were locking doors on the inside so people couldn't leave. and they had one set of doors that were open for anyone who was like causing chaos or passed out drunk, so they could just haul them and throw them out the doors, basically. It was a grand ball. It was the grandest ball the First War democracy ever gave. It was so grand that it interfered with business. Waiters could not force their way through the massed thousands to reach their tables with orders. The smoke from thousands of cigarettes and cheap cigars floated up to the ceiling inside the Coliseum and gradually was packed down to the floor, a dingy, ill-smelling fog through which objects 30 feet away were indiscernible. When women fainted, as they did constantly, they had to be lifted over the heads of the writhing mass surrounding the boxes and the dance floor and passed from hand to hand to the nearest open exit. "Woman fainted, gangway," was a frequent cry. It was followed by the passing of an inert form in bedraggled skirts, actually and physically over the heads of men and women so closely packed that they could not make way if they had so desired. You had to wear, nice outfits, lots of costumes, masks, if you were going to the First Ward Ball. Some of the women who went to the 1908 ball, the reformers, were aghast to find that a lot of them decided to wear bathing suits. These are bathing suits from 1908. This is probably my favorite quote that I found about this whole thing. A tall woman dressed as a 5-year-old boy and carrying a tin pail and a sand shovel was going from box to box, wheedling the occupants and pouring champagne into her pail. When it is filled, she threads through the crowd, giving drinks to all comers. One woman showed up dressed like a nun. A harlot swung a whip across the exposed buttocks of 5 drunks lined up against the wall. Hinky-Dink, talking about this ball, said, "Why, it's great. It's a Lollapalooza. There are more here than ever before. Those reformers tried to blow up the place, and look what they got for it. The Tribune thought people was going to stay away. Well, look at it. All the business houses are here, all the big people, all my friends are out. Chicago ain't no sissy town." So, if you were in one of the boxes, so you can see like up on top where it says bar, the boxes were reserved for people who were maybe more important in the Levy district. So people like Minna and Ada Everley of the Everley Club would have a box. And you also had a lot of wine agents up there who would be trying to ply their wares, which meant they were giving out a lot of free drinks. So people would be up there clamoring for free alcohol from the Everleys, from the wine agents, from whoever would give it to them. If you were there and you're buying alcohol, you're also expected to be showing off to the alderman exactly how much money you're spending. So it was pretty common to stack wine bottles on the tables to the point where like there was no more room and waiters weren't taking it away because you're trying to like show off how much money you're spending and how much you are actually drinking here. The Everley Club this night, they were spending at a rate of $50 an hour and giving most of it away. Ike Bloom, who was the owner of a dance hall at the time, said, "Keep it up, Minnie, you're the only live one around here," about her spending and giving people free drinks. Inside, the mob, crazed by its own numbers, upset tables, smashed bottles and glasses, demolished chairs, climbed on the iron girders in efforts to get out of the way, knocked over waiters, invaded the boxes, filled the gallery and the stairways, crowded the basement, and finally gained such pressure in numbers that it broke one of the alley doors and spilled 50 unfortunates into the alleyway. This is the description of the ball from Dean Walter P. Sumner of the Cathedrals of Saints Peter and Paul. Went there to see what was going on. Up to midnight, the affair was fairly quiet, but from that time on, it became an ever-increasing drunken revel, participated in by women and girls in scant attire and suggestive costumes, men and mere boys. The worst scene was at the annex, converted into a huge drinking room, where I saw men and women lying drunk on the table. At 3:30 o'clock, I saw 4 fights going on at the same time. The crowd rushed from one to another, and the police quieted the storm temporarily by reaching over the heads of spectators and felling the combatants with their clubs. Women who had fainted or become dead drunk were hoisted into the air like bundles and passed over the heads of the crowd by men to exits. 2 girls of about 18 passed the box in which I sat, and one I recognized as having been connected with the work of the Refuge to Girls, whatever that is. They were accompanied by two men, and the quartet were so drunk that they were obliged to form a sort of propped pyramid in order to keep their feet. I like the image of drunken fights and cops just like beating them over the heads of other people who are hanging out. "5,000 drunken people at this hour of 3:30 were doing everything that a drunk does. In the box next to that of the most popular wine agent, a woman has gone clean mad with liquor, as women do. She wears an extreme directoire costume with a large hat. The hat has fallen back on her shoulders and her hair is tumbled down over it. As she stands on the table with outstretched arms, shouting loud obscenities to the crowd which collects to watch her, she bears a fearful resemblance to one of those furies of the French Revolution. Before her box lies a little flashily dressed man, dead drunk, groveling in the leaves of the floor. No one pays more than passing attention to him. A telegraph messenger boy sways in the corner, very sick from free champagne. So one miner did get in and got very drunk. The bath does make reference to him later on, and he's like, well, he had a message. We couldn't tell him to not come in. It's not our fault. A woman in a bedraggled white evening dress hangs draped head down over the edge of her box like clothes on a line. The two men and the other woman in her box are drinking a standing toast, oblivious of her. A woman in a page's costume passes another similarly dressed. She hurls a vivid insult as she passes. The other turns, spitting like a cat, and lays hold on her hair. The drunkards in the vicinity gather around them and cheer until the police break through and bounce them to the ladies' dressing room. That's my outfit. That's my outfit. Ah! Yeah. So, do you guys want to go to this party? Yeah. Honestly, I expected more of you to be like, no. It sounds like chaos, but hell yeah, I want to go to this party. So the Tribune did hold up on their threat, and they did post a list of some people who were present at the ball. So if we want to name and shame them here, we can. Michael Priebe, how dare you? Al Houghton. Vernon L. Bean. Vern Bean, can't believe he was there. And there was one photographer, Lyman Atwell, from the Record Herald, who did come to the front where it was crowded with thousands of people who couldn't get in, and he did try to set up his camera to take photos. So what he said is that as he was setting up the camera, he saw Bathhouse notice him and charge him with his henchmen, and they beat him up and they destroyed the camera. And he said that like Bathhouse was the one who was punching him for it. Took him to court over this. This is the sketch of him in court, which is pretty great. Caption there, Bathhouse gives tone to court. He would always talk about how he has to give the right tone to the ball, so he's giving the right tone to court here. Bath basically said, I didn't do that at all. There were bomb threats for the ball. A bomb had gone off the night before. I thought if someone's setting up a flash bulb, it's going to cause chaos. I just looked at him and did this. I didn't charge him at all, and he was not found guilty of attacking the photographer. Apparently there were other cartoonists that tried to get in the ball too, but they were recognized and they were ejected. There's the Bath in court about the same year. Looking a little worried. The Tribune estimated that they probably made about $150,000 this year. It's not minus expenses yet, but holy hell, that's a lot of money for 1908. The Inner Ocean, last quote on the 1908 ball, just to wrap it up for you because it's real snarky. The next day they said, the affair was refreshingly unique in its freedom from galling formality. Although the exclusiveness of the women guests was evident from about 78,954 tons of diamonds and other jewels, the only thing necessary for an introduction to any of those present was the ability to buy. So do you think that they came back and had another one in 1909? Yeah, not really. This is basically the last ball. They tried. They did not want to be shut down. They're making a lot of money here. It's a lot of fun. But at this point in time, it's just gained too much notoriety. There are too many people who are speaking out against it. And like, yeah, I mean, shoving 30,000 people in a building meant for 15,000 people when they're all drunk and the doors are locked, like, that's hella unsafe. So they announced that there were going to be some changes. The aldermen did try to get ahead of it this year and try to get ahead of all of the reformers. They said that there would be no free tickets handed out anymore, and that instead tickets were going to be $2 each instead of $1. So maybe they'll make more money that way. They also formed the First Ward Auxiliary, which was an organization that was created to lead the ball, and that they would take all the proceeds and use it as benefit to care for the sick and comfort the afflicted. So basically they tried to create a charity organization to run the ball so they could really double down on the fact that they were not actually taking this and then like putting it in their own piggy banks. Bathhouse, when he announced the ball, it was going to be held on the 13th of December 1909, he wrote a poem and published it in the papers. Said, "On with the dance, O'Malley, let joy be unconfined. Forget your cares for an hour or two, cast trouble to the wind. 'Twill be a night long to remember. The date is 13th of December. Make haste a partner find." So they tried to get that special bar permit so that they could keep the Coliseum open until 3 a.m., but they were not able to receive it. The chief of police basically said, "I'm not going to grant it to you at this time. The mayor isn't either. If you want to avoid embarrassment, withdraw your submission for this." So they took it back, and they said, "Okay, that's fine. We don't have to do that. We can still be open to 1 a.m. But the reformers are still on them. Here's a list of things that the paper said you can't do this year at the First Ward Ball. Don't consider the bomb threats a joke, so it's dangerous. Don't think that because you are a con man or a thief, you'll be welcomed at all by the ball. The police will undeceive you. The police said that they would have paddy wagons lined up, and anyone that they recognized who was a criminal was going to be immediately ejected and arrested. Don't buy cases of wine and beer at 12:25 a.m. and think you can drink after 1. The bar may not refund you, and the police won't let you consume. So that's initially what they said, if they can't buy to 3 a.m. Don't wear the old-time costumes, for moral censorship may land you in a cell. Don't bat some obnoxious persons over the head with empty bottles, for such acts are not regarded as pleasantries this year, which is funny. Yeah. So you had to have the right costumes on. First Ward Ball beforehand, it was common to have people in drag. Not this time. You had to wear clothes appropriate for your gender. You had to have dresses that went down to the floor. Ooh, indeed. So there's a lot of public pushback against this, and the aldermen are still trying to go forth to hold the ball. But it was not necessarily to be. This is his poem saying that they're not going to have a ball this year. No ball, that's all. Basically, the ball was supposed to be held on Monday, December 13th, and that Friday, the mayor went to the aldermen and said, "You cannot do this. You cannot have a First Ward Ball. You have to cancel it." The aldermen are the aldermen, though, and they're not going to immediately bow down to the mayor on this. So they said, "Okay, fine," and then they announced that it wasn't going to be a ball, but that they were glad that Chicago's becoming a better city, and instead they're going to have a patriotic military concert. So important to note that by this time, they had already sold $20,000 worth of tickets. The event is still happening, no refunds. And all the waiters who had paid to serve at the event, no refunds. No alcohol was going to be served. It was going to start at 8 p.m. and it was going to end at midnight. There would be bands that were playing like the William Tell Overture. It did not do well. The ball happened, but there were only about 2,500 people who came through. They said people were falling asleep in their seats. All the seats were nailed down to the floor, so you don't have that chaos of people dancing and crushed together. There's no grand march. And basically the people who attended went just to make sure that the aldermen saw them, and then they're like, "We got to get out, this sucks." And then they went and partied elsewhere. The bath blamed the number 13 for part of this. And yeah, like made a list of different people's names whose letters all add up to the number 13. And he's like, I knew this was going to be a curse on the ball because it was scheduled for December 13th. I should have never let this happen. And this is why it failed this year. And not that like public pressure was turning against vice districts and letting crap like this happen all the time. So this was the last first ward ball. It was kind of sad. But 1897 through 1908, they had these crazy, crazy parties, the likes of which, as I said before, we have never seen since, and I don't think we're ever going to see again. I would love to go back in time, even just for 5 minutes, to any of these to see what the hell is going on. Hopefully to see the Bath in lavender trousers and a green coat and a red sash drunkenly marching through, because that sounds like a lot of fun. So I say for all of us who have drinks, let's raise a toast. Cheers to the first ward ball. We have to get through 16,000 quarts of champagne tonight, so we've got to get started.